everyone understands what CLIA is. CLIA is the federal law that, oh, I thought you had a question. If you have a question, just raise your hand or just shout it out. I'm happy to answer anything. I sometimes get tired just hearing myself, my own voice. So CLIA, for those of you, well, everyone should know about CLIA. It is the federal law that governs how we run our clinical laboratories. It includes federal rules regarding the brick and mortar lab and also rules related to the personnel in the lab. So I'm not going to, this talk does not involve that. I think everyone pretty much knows that your lab has to have a CLIA certificate, either a waived or non-waived or both. So today we're going to just concentrate on the Florida rules, which Florida is one of, last count, 14 states that actually license clinical laboratory personnel. So there's not many states that license clinical laboratory personnel, but Florida is one of them. And we have one of the more stricter licenses in the nation, okay? They are all, your license is governed by Florida statute and then by the Florida rules. And I'm going to give you a quick understanding of what the difference is, because I think a lot of people use statutes, rules, regulations, all those terms interchangeably. Okay, the first thing we're going to talk about is Florida statutes. Florida statutes are actually the laws of the state of Florida. The laws, the statutes, do not tell you how to do something. It just proclaims you have to do this, but it does not tell you how to do it. So under Florida statutes, chapter 483, part 2, this is the statute called Clinical Laboratory Personnel, very self-explanatory. This is the statute that says, hey, the state of Florida, you guys have to be licensed to do clinical lab work, okay? It also says you have to create a board, you have to have CEUs, you have to have qualifications, all that jazz. Does not tell you, though, how to do it, okay? It does say, hey, the board that you create should be the one creating all those, how to do things, okay? So again, when you think of statutes, you think of it as the proclamation of what you have to do in the state of Florida, right? Are you gonna, do you want me to send you a copy of this? For, oh, okay. Oh, okay, yeah, good. All right, so under statutes, like everything else in the world, especially in the United States, there are exemptions to the statute. And there are a few exemptions. So basically, if you are doing clinical lab work, that individual doing clinical lab work should be licensed in the majority of cases. However, there are exceptions. The first case is clinical laboratories run by the government and the military. So for like VA hospitals, if you go to a VA hospital or military hospital in the state of Florida, the individuals in the laboratory do not have to hold a Florida clinical lab personnel license. I can tell you most do, because a lot of them have another job in another private hospital, whatever. So, but they are not required to if they are working in a VA hospital, military hospital, or anything that's run by the government, by the federal government, I should state, not the state government. We're going to talk about the state labs in a few minutes. The other thing is that people don't understand, sometimes we get this issue with researchers that come into the state of Florida. There is a very distinct line between research and clinical lab testing in the state of Florida. They look at it very, very black and white. And some states don't. Sometimes there is an overlap. Here in the state of Florida, though, because of our statute requiring any clinical lab testing requiring a state license for that individual, that has created a very distinct line of what research is and what clinical lab testing is. So research purely has to be research. So never at any moment should a research result be placed in a patient's chart or a provider act upon that result. The minute that happens, the person putting out that result should have a Florida clinical lab license, because under the state of Florida then, you are no longer doing research, you are doing clinical lab work. Okay, so that is a very distinct line. And it does come up sometimes to the board where individuals who work in research laboratories, and we have many in the state of Florida, as you know, usually associated with big universities, that experience that they may have gained in the research laboratory does not qualify towards getting a clinical lab license, okay? Because under the state of Florida rules, research and clinical lab testing are very distinct. So again, the minute you put a result in a patient's chart or a provider acts upon a result, that is considered clinical lab testing in the state of Florida. You are no longer doing research. So those individuals must hold a clinical lab license. Respiratory therapists, just by their scope of practice and their own state of Florida license, they can run moderately complex blood gases. We all have them in our hospitals, okay? So, and they actually can do any alternate site testing, which we're gonna talk about briefly. So basically they can run epochs, istats, novas, all that, not just blood gases. And that is under what used to be called the alternate site rule, but now it's the lab and radiology and ancillary rule under ACA. All right, and of course, our advanced practice registered nurses who perform provider-performed microscopy don't have to hold a clinical lab license, but it is under their PPM. So if they hold a PPM under CLIA, they can do it without a clinical lab license here in the state of Florida. Any questions so far? So those are exemptions. Okay. This other big exemption really doesn't, there's not many of these left. Basically what this says is if you have a medical practice and you are only testing on your patients, those people who are doing the testing do not have to hold a clinical lab license. Okay. This is rare now because there's not a lot of private practices out there. And if they are, there's sometimes multiples. They're in like a group. So what happens is they're not considered this anymore because they might be doing testing for patients in another practice. So you don't see this very often anymore, but that is an exemption. So again, if you have a private practice, it gives you some examples there, and you are only doing testing on your specific patients, the individuals who are performing that test do not have to have a clinical lab license. It's a little different if you go to like your primary care physician, who most likely the practice is part of a larger group or part of a hospital system or whatever, and you have like medical assistants or nurse aides who are doing waived testing. That's okay, because you don't need the clinical lab license to do that. Okay. Any questions about this? Again, it's becoming more rare nowadays because you just don't see private practices anymore. Okay. I'm not going to go through all of this. I'm just showing you what the statutes define. It actually defines when a clinical lab personnel is, right? And you have to remember we have certain levels in our licensure. We have a director level, supervisor level, technologist, and technician. We also, we're kind of unique in the 14 states that license lab people in that we license histotechs also. A lot of the licensure states do not, because if you read CLIA, CLIA doesn't really consider histotechnology a separate discipline. They consider it part of a processing. So a lot of the other states who license individuals do not license histotechs. Another thing is we do not license phlebotomists or lab assistants here in the state of Florida. My personal opinion is that we should, because phlebotomists are very important in our pre-analytic, because our biggest errors, where do they come from? The pre-analytic state. So I've always been a big proponent of licensure for our phlebotomists, okay? The other thing that the statute says, like I said before, says you have to have a board set up. The board is responsible for taking the edicts in the statute and making up the rules that go along with it. The rules will tell you how to do what the statute's telling you you have to do. Okay. The board of clinical lab personnel is made up of 7 individuals. And these are the 7 individuals that should make up the board. I can tell you currently we only have 3. We have a quorum. It would be nice if we were fully packed with our 7, because what happens is one of our 3 can't make a meeting. We no longer have a quorum. So when that happens, the business of your licensure stops. So we have been trying to get individuals placed on the board. The only person who can appoint that person to the board, though, is our governor. And it has to be done through the governor's gubernatorial appointment office. There is an application. They're held for 1 year. However, what's happened within the last few years, the governor has other things on his mind. And, and he has sort of let those applications expire. So I have been told, thankfully recently though, that the gubernatorial appointment office has started looking at those applications again, only because there's literally only 3 of us left. And we are in real danger. One of our members might be retiring soon. Not me, I'm not that old. I am, but not that old. So once that person retires, the business of your license and how to maintain your license stops. So that becomes a problem. So that's why they're looking at it now. So if you are interested in joining our lovely board, please go just look up Florida Gubernatorial Appointment Office, and it will take you straight to the application. It is quite a lengthy application. It's all online right now. You will have to disclose some financial information, more so than we had to before. That's just to make sure that you're not going to embezzle money from the state, okay? And you will be checked on that every year, your finances. And then you'll have interviews. Usually you have to interview the state surgeon general, okay? And then it goes through the Senate process to get you appointed by the Florida Senate, and then the governor signs off. So that's the process. You'll notice that 2 of the individuals on the board are citizens of the state. They have nothing to do with our industry. So they are not related to the laboratory at all. And that's a good thing, because they're there to watch that we don't do something that's detrimental to the citizens of the state of Florida. So you want those 2 consumer seats. All the boards that fall under medical quality assurance of the Department of Health have 2 citizens who sit on the board that have nothing to do with their particular industry. That includes all nursing, everybody, respiratory therapy, imaging, all of that. They always have members that are not related to the industry. And they're there to make sure that we are doing, that we're ruling properly to benefit our citizens here in the state of Florida. All board members have term limits. Apparently my term limit expired on 2018, but you serve at the pleasure of the governor. So they automatically extend your term until you are replaced or you request to leave for various reasons. Any questions about the board? Did you know they existed? Okay. You'll be surprised how many people don't know that there's a board that actually handles all the work related to your license. And the most important work is the creation of rules, okay? And those rules tell you how to practice in the state of Florida. Okay. So I just went through all of this. So we do ratify all the licenses. So when you renew your license in August, the board right shortly after that will sign off on it. Without the board signing off on it, that license renewal technically is not valid until we ratify it, okay? We actually ratify the licenses at every single meeting. So we're pretty caught up in those individuals that have come into the state or students that have just graduated and obtained their license. So we ratify licenses at every meeting. But again, without that ratification, your license does not renew. Okay. We also are responsible for designating the national certifications that you have to take in order to qualify for a license here in the state of Florida. We actually approve the training program. So every training program that trains anybody in the state of Florida must hold a clinical training program licensure from the state of Florida. Okay, that's for any program, even the ones outside of state. If they have clinical affiliations with the hospital in the state of Florida, they still have to hold that license. Okay, and at the same time,
my computer's turned on, so I have.
we
I
approve
hope.
the curriculum related to those
Ronson?
programs. Now, I can tell you the rules now have gotten a little simpler, where if you have a NACLS accredited program, we usually just give you an automatic stamp of approval.
RAW.
But we still have programs out there that are not NACLS approved, not many left anymore. And those have to be renewed every 2 years, like your license. So we have to go through that curriculum review every few years. It does tell us, the statute does tell us that you have to renew every 24 months, every 2 years. You have to have a certain amount of continuing education. That's why you're sitting in here now looking at laws and rules. Laws and rules, medical errors, which is 2 hours. Laws and rules, which is 1, and then HIV. A little quick note about HIV. I get this question all the time. Why the heck are we still doing HIV CEU? Well, I don't know what happened. It was way before my tenure on the board. Years ago, when the statutes came out, HIV requirement CEU was placed in the statute. Because it's placed in the statute, we can't remove it. Unless we have a legislative champion to lobby for the board to get it removed. Now, we have had that in the past, but it doesn't even pass the front door of the legislator because apparently they have other things more important to put on their docket when they come into session, okay? So that is why we're stuck with the HIV. If you ask nursing, however, nursing, for some reason, they did the smart thing. When they were developing their rules,
we can blame him. It's
they
fine.
included the HIV. So that means their board could eliminate it because the board is in charge of their rules. Okay. So remember, you have the statute that only a legislator can change, telling us what we have to do. The board then is told you have to create these rules, which we do, but the HIV is in the statute, so the board can't overrule the statute. Okay? So that is why you still have to take your 1 hour of HIV. And we know it's a pain. And we know it's not relevant in this day and age, but that is the reason. Okay. The big thing we also do in the board is we establish minimal qualifications for licensure. Okay, that's the big thing. You'll see the little matrix if you look in the board rules. You'll see all the different things you have to have in order to obtain a license. And that depends on the type of track you're going to use to get your license. Remember, you have to demonstrate education. You have to demonstrate your certification, and you have to demonstrate experience. So those are the 3 pillars: education, certification, and experience. Now you ask yourself, what about students that just graduated? If you go through a ClinLab program of some kind, that replaces the experience, right?
Okay. So
this is the most popular kind of poor individual who just went through their program is not going to have experience. But if you can prove that you've graduated from a Florida board approved program, that counts for your experience. Now, for individuals coming from other states, they can use that experience to qualify for a license here in the state of Florida. We do have a list of acceptable national certifications. Years ago, the state of Florida had its own state boards. That was taken away in 1994. I know because I was the last class that sat for that Florida board, and I am still bitter about it because 1 month after I took my Florida boards, they came out saying, "Oh, you don't have to do those anymore." I'm like, so that's how come I know the date, 1994. So you don't have to do those anymore, but you still have to pass your national certification exam and you have to prove your education. Now, one thing that is interesting, CLIA had a major upgrade of their license, of their personnel qualifications back in December of last year. It was one of the first major upgrades that CLIA's had in a long time. And we laughed in the board because they actually made theirs mirror ours that we've had for decades. Now, whenever state has a separate rule or statute that mirrors a federal statute, those statutes or rules have to be equal than or more than the federal law. So all of our rules have to be more than the CLIA. So we always were stricter in what the education qualifications were than CLIA was. Now CLIA has caught up. So now we're in line, but now we're looking at it going, well, maybe we're making it too easy. So we have to go back. We are changing some of our qualifications again. We never allowed physics. CLIA allowed physics as a pathway for your education part of qualification. We never allowed that in the state of Florida. We never allowed things like geology. And I can tell you that your national certification exam entities allow them. So for example, we had an applicant who presented to the board 5 times. He had a geology degree. He was extremely intelligent. He basically read a chemistry book and passed the AACP chemistry exam with a geology. Okay. And AACP allowed, so just because you have an AACP, AAMT, AABB, ABB, and ABB, doesn't mean that they will not allow you to sit for them. They do not mirror CLIA and they do not mirror the state of Florida. Okay. And another big thing that I think a lot of people forget about the board is that we are a disciplinary and judicial body. We actually have a probable cause board. So I sit on that. So we can remove your license if you violate any of the rules of the state of Florida. Okay. We can actually advise and recommend criminal action against you. Okay. So it is a judicial body. So if you sit on one of our board meetings where it's in person, we only have in-person meetings when there is a disciplinary action being presented. If you were to sit at that board meeting, the public is invited, you will see that in action. We do have a person who swears in the person. We have a prosecutor from the state. We have our own board counsel that works for the state. We are considered a judicial body. All right, so keep that in mind. Okay, so we talked about the statutes. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit. We really did talk a lot about the rules also, but our rules, or the part of the laws that tell you how to do things, you find in Division 64B3, which designates the Board of Clinical Laboratory Personnel. And this is where you find everything you want to know about how you qualify for a license in the state of Florida. Okay. My time. Just going to go through and highlight all the rules. There's not many. Don't freak out. I got 30 more minutes. The first one's just a definition type rules, just basically telling you that you have to have an address with us. Little note about that. We have a lot of issues with people not updating their home addresses. So please, under MQA, where you go to renew your license, please change your address if you've moved. Make sure it's all current. The other piece that people forget to do that has created issues in the past is your practice address. Okay, so where you actually perform testing, you have to update the address. Okay, it creates issues. If you move, don't forget not just your home address, but your practice address. Okay, and you can do that in your MQA account, where the same place you renew. 1.008 again is just telling us how often we have to have board meetings. We have to have board meetings at least quarterly. We could have ad hoc if there was a serious situation. That's a very rare thing. If there is disciplinary action, that board meeting must be in person. Our next one in person is slated for next year in Tampa. We have another one coming up in November, but we don't think we're going to have disciplinary action, so that will be a call. Now, if you attend an in-person meeting, that counts as your laws and rules. Like, it's surprising people about that. That's why when you come to the in-person meeting, they have you sign in and put your license, because that will count for your laws and rules automatically, because you are actually seeing the board in action. It's very entertaining. It's even more entertaining when we have to hire a policeman to sit there sometimes. Yeah, they're fun. I'm the chair, by the way, if you haven't figured it out. Okay. All right. Also, the rules tells us we have to have on our agenda every single time a place for public comment. So I can tell you there's not a lot of people that show up off the street to look at our stuff, but we do have a lot of associations that come and talk to us, and we give them time at the end of the meeting to ask us anything. Now, this is an unusual process too, because even though they can ask us a question, I can tell you it's unlikely that the board will answer, especially if it's a question about interpreting the rule. We're not going to answer you there. We're going to say to you, respectfully, can you please send in a declaratory statement? So we won't say it. Our board counsel will immediately jump in and say, the board cannot answer that, because remember, it's a judicial body, right? So think of the Supreme Court. If they were to come out and just start saying stuff, you're going to create what's called precedent. So you can't really do that. So we are told not to. So, but if you want to come and sort of voice a concern, we definitely have addressed those, you know, especially from associations, in the state of Florida, or even associations from anywhere else in the nation. If they have concerns, we will discuss it. But if interpretation of rules or statutes, we will not do unless you submit an official declaratory statement. Request, which is also found in the gubernatorial. The governor's office has a thing for declaratory statement. Or you can just go to the Florida Board of Clinical Laboratory Personnel website, and there's a space that you can actually link to for that. Okay, it talks about probable cause. I kind of alluded to this. There is a separate meeting that only I attend with one other individual from the state, a citizen from the state, and we sit on a probable cause. So what that is a prosecutor will present evidence against a person related to their licensure. They have violated part of the statute, and obviously in turn, many of the rules. So we hear the evidence, and then we say we either approve or not approve for prosecutor's office to go ahead and prosecute that person. And then that person will have to present to the board, and the board in full will have to decide what will be done to that person's licensure. It can be fines, and it can be revocation of your license. It can be suspensions. And then we can also say, we recommend that there's criminal action here and this needs to go. It usually is recommended in probable cause, but a board itself can do that. So, judicial body. The next 2.002 is actually defining the different levels. So we have director, supervisor, technologist, and technician. Everyone asks me about director, like what is a director? Well, a director basically is a non-pathologist, is the easiest way I can explain it, is a non-pathologist. It could be a PhD, it could be an MD, but it is someone who passes a director level national certification. They have the appropriate experience and the appropriate education. They can qualify as a director. Now, what that director level supervisor, that director level license gives them is that they can get their name on their CLIA. Okay. There's not many of them running around the state of Florida, but they're actually becoming more and more. And one of the big reasons is because now you can get a PhD in laboratory science. So we're getting some of those individuals applying. I just had one come up. So that's a good thing. So if you want to run a non-wave laboratory, through that director license, you would qualify to be the name on that CLIA certificate. Now, I'm not going to go into what the responsibility is of those individuals whose name on that CLIA certificate. Just remember that that is taken very seriously. If you are, fraud, sends you to jail, federal jail. So just be mindful of that. All right. So that's what a director level does. Supervisor level, some of you may have that already. Again, you have to prove experience more than anything. Usually your education certification has been covered by your technologist level. All right. Your supervisor license. Let me just point something out because I get this question all the time. People with a supervisor's license do not automatically qualify as technical supervisor under CLIA. And that is a big misconception. They are not the same. I have supervisor level licensees in the state of Florida that would never qualify as a technical supervisor based on their education or even certification. So just because someone has a supervisor license does not mean they're a technical supervisor under CLIA. So be mindful of that, especially if you are responsible for hiring individuals. Okay, you must look at their education, experience, and certification to determine if they would qualify as technical supervisor, because a technical supervisor under CLIA has very distinct responsibilities. And just because you have a supervisor's license doesn't mean you automatically qualify. Now, I can tell you that technologist levels, if you have a BS degree and a certain amount of experience, you don't really need a supervisor's license. You would qualify as a technical supervisor. So the question has come up, what is the benefit of a supervisor level license? It had benefit years ago. But as CLIA has caught up with us and as our qualifications have changed in the state of Florida, I could argue either way. But if you qualify for a supervisor license in the state of Florida, please go ahead and get it. Because really, if you've gone through a program, through an MLS program, oh. She's making a signal. Okay. Okay. If you've gone through an MLS program, you probably will, and done all 5 areas, you probably will get your supervisor license with no problem. Okay. The other big one that I like to point out is the definitions rule. People always ask me, where can I find the rule that says what my lab assistants can do? All right. My board, I call it my board, my tenure on the board, we actually sat down and took this rule, which it's the very last paragraph, paragraph 17, and you won't even know it's talking about lab assistants by the title. It's called manual pre-testing. That's the title of the paragraph. This is where the state tells you what your lab assistants can do. We actually revised this within the last 5 years in order to put it more aligned to modern techniques in the laboratory. Before, there was a very hard line that lab assistants cannot do anything to initiate the analytical process. Well, I think we all know what our very large robotic automation chemistry analyzers look like. I can tell you that in my lab, the MLS don't even touch the instrument. They just stand in front of a bunch of computers and just stare into space. Okay. But who's actually loading the instrument is who? Our lab assistants, right? Now, one can argue, well, they're initiating the analytic process. They're starting a button that just moves a little thingy. That's what they're doing, right? The analytic process, the instrument is smart enough. Well, you hold. is smart enough, the computers are smart enough to determine specimen acceptability, right? So there's no decision made by the lab assistant whether that sample is acceptable or not. It should be the computer, should be the instrument, however it gets done. All right, so we said, so really we have to allow for that now, because I'm not going to put my highly paid MLS employees to load instruments, right? We want them to be able to look at graphs and make interpretations of troubleshooting. That's where their education comes into play, and that's where I should use them. So that's why now our lab assistants have been given a little bit more leeway. They can also make slides from a primary specimen. They've actually been able to do that for many years, by the way, but a lot of people don't realize that they can. So we utilize them in hematology to make it, when the few times that manual testing is even done anymore. Usually it's just the instrument doing the diff. They can do slides. They can help in cytology prep to make slides. They even go out with interventional radiology. They even go out and do that. They're trained for FNAs. I mean, we utilize them in a lot of places. Microbiology, they can streak plates from a primary specimen, not from the culture, okay? Because once you grow it, it has its own entity. So we felt, okay, that's a little bit too much. And by the way, when you pull from a culture, you have to kind of know, you have to make decisions where you're pulling it from, right? Lab assistant's not going to be able to do that. But if you're doing it from a primary specimen, there's no really decision point. You just have to know how to streak a plate. So they can do that. We utilize them in the transfusion service, electronic cross matches. The computer's telling you what unit to pull. They don't even have to decide that. All right, so they issue blood. They're allowed to do that because it's all computerized now. And scanning is the key. I, as an inspector for CAP and ABB, if no one scans, that's a problem. Scanning will save us. So scan, 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 okay? So a little note about your lab assistant. So definitely start looking at your lab assistants a little differently and thinking about different ways that they can be utilized. Yes?
We at our facility allow them automatically start when they put the assessment on, not actually push the button. Like you're saying, even if they're in the start button.
I mean,
okay.
like I would, I mean, honestly, I think they all work like that now. Like, I mean, maybe there's like a physical red button that they push. I don't know. It goes back to, you have to look at it from, you have to be able to defend it, right? So if you're saying, this person's not making any decision about the acceptability of this sample other than, you know, the normal specimen processing when they come in, right? When they spin them down, they might be hemolyzed, but other acceptability criteria that that instrument needs to do is going to be done by the instrument, right? And those people sitting in front of the bank of computers, I always walk in, I'm like, what are they doing? They're just staring at the space. They're the ones that are going to be like, oh, wait, the line is telling me there's a blip somewhere, okay? The MLS, that's their job to troubleshoot that. So really, the idea is how many decision points does that lab assistant have to do? Really, it has to be sort of, okay, I'm just loading an instrument. No, at any time do they have to make sort of a judgment call. It's the judgment call that's the problem, that you have to look at it. Does that make sense? Okay. That's why computers are very important in these cases, right? Especially like in transfusion, they're not going to decide what unit to give the patient. The computer's going to say, it's either been assigned already or it's a computer cross-match. This is where it is, go get it, and that's it. And then you scan, they have to scan everything in, so they're not even, there's no, you know, we're minimizing the transcription error situation.
Prior calibrator hold prior to the clinic specimen, does the technologist have to do just that part and then turn it over
Yes.
to the lab assistant to do the rest?
Yeah, anything that involves the maintenance of a line of an instrument, think about what you're trained to do in your programs, right? A lab assistant isn't trained to do calibrations and stuff like that. All of that still has to be done by an MLS or an MLT. Okay, so maintenance, no, they can't touch. It is just simply as loading an instrument. And it could involve hitting something on the computer. Okay, that's fine. But there's no judgment call there for them. You know, they just know that it's going to initiate. And then once I'm talking those huge robotic lines, you know, as they're going through, something's going to happen. And then the MLS who sit, or the MLTs who sit behind a bank of computers are going to get that warning. So they have to react in some way. They have to fix it. The lab assistant has no thing in that. They should not be in that process. Good question. Okay. All right. We talked a little bit about the training programs. Our training programs have to be NACLS certified nowadays. If they are, they're usually given a rubber stamp approval by the board. We still have some programs that have never gone through NACLS years ago, and we still have to. Some of them pop up new, but those are rare now. I think everybody, all training programs are trying to seek NACLS because it just makes it so much easier. Remember that includes programs outside of the state of Florida, but those programs that might have clinical affiliations with the hospital in the state of Florida still have to hold a Florida clinical laboratory program license. And those are renewed every 2 years, just like our licenses. Okay? And we also ratify all of those programs also at every meeting. I told you we're ready to define what the curriculum is. It's made it easier on the board because we don't really have to review the curriculum for those that are already NACLS approved. Okay. Trainee registration, we handle that. So if you are a trainee, you must hold a trainee license in order to go through your program or your clinicals. We talked briefly about this. Let's talk about academic versus applied because this confuses people. This is something that Florida was actually ahead of CLIA. Now CLIA has caught up as of December. We have never allowed applied sciences to qualify for your education to receive a license in the state of Florida. You're probably thinking, what is the difference? Academic programs, and try to simplify it, are those programs that you take that basically are those general programs. I mean, courses that you might take your first or second year. Bio 101, Chem 101, okay? And they're usually attended by the bio majors, nursing, you know, pre-med, anybody in the sciences, we all have to take Bio 101. That is considered an academic science, okay? Applied science are the courses you take in your MLS program. So they're courses that are specific to your profession, okay? Does that help? We get this question a lot because a lot of times people think they qualify through their education and they're short on their academic credits because you have to have certain amount of chemistry, certain amount of bio, all academic bio, all academic chemistry, and then 24 academic science in general, okay? So again, the courses you take in your lab program do not count towards your education. Your program will count, though, towards experience. Because if you are a recent graduate, you have no experience, but you went through a Florida-approved program. Okay. All right, any questions about that? Okay. And then it starts talking about all the different levels. We already talked about our lovely supervisors. Remember, if you're a supervisor, does not automatically mean you qualify as a technical supervisor under CLIA. Most likely you do, but double check. Technologists, if you have a BS degree, you probably do qualify as a technical supervisor under CLIA. We have technician level, and we talked about our director levels. Public health laboratory personnel, this is a carve out. Technologists and technician qualifications for individuals that work at the public health labs. There's 4 left in the state of Florida. Those qualifications are actually in statute. So the board can't do any, we can't really go beyond that. So if someone doesn't qualify, there is nothing we can do because it's stuck in statute. Now, if they're applying for director and supervisor level and they're going to be working in a public health laboratory, that falls under our rules. So it becomes a little dicey. We've had individuals apply for a public health technologist license and they're missing something in the statute. And if that were to happen to our clinical lab technologists, sometimes we give them like 6 months to go get the missing education that they need. We work with that licensee if it's a minor thing that they need to qualify. But for public health laboratory personnel, because it's in statute, the board cannot really help them. They either have to figure it out on their own and what they're missing, but there isn't anything that the board can do to help them along if they're missing something, because it's in statute. And remember, I can't change anything in the statute. Let's talk about endorsement. This is our newest rule. Okay. This rule, which is actually applies to every board in the state of Florida, that includes nursing, that includes medical, everything. All the boards, radiology, imaging, it's the newest rule. It's placed in all the board rules now. It says if another state in the United States has clinical laboratory personnel licensure, they may automatically qualify for a Florida license. Now, those programs, those license programs have to be equal to or more than the Florida one. Now, I can tell you we have 14 states that license techs. We already have given licenses through endorsement. It started in July. Well, actually started, but it was ratified in July. We actually have put a lot of people through there. And the majority of them come from California and New York. And I can tell you that those 2 states automatically qualify for endorsement. Actually, California's licensure program is more than us. So they're automatic. New York is equal to. However, we have some issues like from Hawaii. Really, that program, all the individual does is pay a fee to obtain a license. But they have no board. It doesn't give you qualifications. So we have deemed it not equitable to our licensure program. Okay. So that's the board. We have to decide on that. I've already started looking at some of them. So if you have a license in California and New York to practice clinical laboratory, you should automatically get a license in the state of Florida. The other 12 programs we are dissecting. It's really interesting. Documentation for licensure just tells you what you have to submit to us. Transcripts, everyone knows we have to have either a diploma or transcript to prove your education. Foreign transcripts have to be evaluated by a specific evaluator credentialing vendor, and there's a list on the board office to do that. A little quirk of that, individuals from the Philippines do not have to have their education evaluated because the education system in the Philippines is considered equivalent to the United States. So they do not have to submit an official evaluation. Okay. So yes. No, I love questions. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Not have that evaluation transcript from the Philippines,
Uh-huh.
I would be cited. That it's only transcripts from Puerto Rico, that I would not have to have that. evaluation.
Florida is stricter than CLIA. So one could argue. Now, there's a caveat to that. I wouldn't even consider it CLIA that would demonstrate that. It would be your accreditation entity. Because CAP requires that I have a PSV to do that. So I would argue that it's not really CLIA that's telling me I have to do that. It's CAP. But Florida, it's right there on the website, says we do not have to evaluate Philippine transcripts. But, so CLIA, okay. I know if I have CAP and I know CAP, but they back off because Florida doesn't require it. So, I mean, it comes up, but we gave them a Florida license. So yeah. The interpretation of the inspector. I know them well. But yeah, I would argue it would be my accreditation entity that would probably balk at that more than, I mean, CLIA could do a confirmation inspection or a complaint inspection. And they may, I would fight that one though. That's just me, because we're a licensure state. So yeah. Usually it's understood if you're a licensure state, they don't really dictate our qualifications. Sometimes, again, it's the inspector. But then I question, so you're going to have this poor person go through the process of sending it in to Joseph Solney and have it all evaluated? Okay. Okay. I mean, it's up to you. Just telling you what Florida says. All right. Good question, though. Does everybody know that you can change the status of your license? I get this all the time, especially from our individuals who are so blessed to be retired. Linda, I don't want to have to pay for this. Okay, you don't have to. Put it in inactive. You pay a lot less. And if you, for some weird reason, you need to go back to work, it's very easy. Because if you get rid of it and you try to get back into the industry, you're going to have to qualify under the current rules, which you may not. Okay. So I advise those of you who are maybe leaving the state, retiring, we should all be so lucky, go and put in inactive. All right. So if for some reason you have to come back to the state, or you have to start, or you get bored in your retirement, I don't understand how that's even possible, you can reactivate your license pretty easily. And you don't have to qualify under the current rules, which might be stricter than when you first initially got your license, right? Okay. I think I'm almost done. Delinquent license, please renew. Okay, there is a big thing though I need to preface here. This is all just kind of all about, since we're short on time, but I do want to talk about something really important. This is telling us that we have to take medical errors, laws and rules, blah, blah, blah. Okay. You guys can read through this as best as I can. So it's not really anything new. All right. Here are the links. When you get the presentation, the links are, you can link to it. Before I go, everybody has had their background screening done? Okay. Let me, there's the teacher's pet over there. She's like, I did it, I'm done. Good. Let me just clarify something really quick, because people get confused. Go to the board website. It gives you a step-by-step of what you can do. I did it myself because I'm like, okay, I'm like the dumbest person for these things. I am not going to get this right. It is dumb proof. Okay. They assume you don't know what you're doing. It's great. All right. You have to get your fingerprints done by a vendor on the list. Okay. So that's the first step. You have to go with a little code that the website will give you to the fingerprint people. Okay. You go in there, you put your little hand on there. It's electronic. It's not ink anymore. We're not in the 1940s. Okay. Then they take that with the little code you give them, and then they send it to the FBI. The FBI searches all the databases in the United States to see if you've done anything bad. Okay. They need that code because when the FBI gets your results, that code will tell them where to send it to. They're going to send it to what's called the Florida Clearinghouse. And that is where your fingerprint and the background screening results are stored. You will set up an account for that clearinghouse through, if you just go step by step. Okay, there's a section there also that says, are you allowing the board access to results? If you put no, then you're not going to be able to renew your license. So make sure you're answering yes to that question because the board has to know if you're cleared. Do not wait till the last minute because every single healthcare practitioner in the state of Florida has to do this. Your license renewal opens 90 days before expiration. Do not wait 90 days. Do it now. And there's fingerprint vendors everywhere. There's one near my house that it's the UPS store. I'm like, okay. So there's two parts to it. You got fingerprints and then get sent to background screening. And those take that takes a while. And they're not going to hurry it up. Oh, question? Oh, I thought you were telling me. Stop. Yeah. No, there's no stupid question. Yes. Uh-huh. Yes. No. First of all, go to the clearinghouse. It's going to link you to the clearinghouse, the steps, okay? Because this is what happened to me. I go in there, I'm thinking, I've had a background screen, a level 2 background screen. It's called level 2, which is where the FBI gets involved. I don't remember the last time I did it. So I didn't think there was anything in there. So I go in, I'm thinking I'm going to set up my account in the clearinghouse, and it says, hey, I know you. And I'm like, what? I'm like, okay. So I go in there, and there's my face. Looks like a mugshot. And no, I didn't get arrested. So I was like, I think it was my TSA. But the problem with that is you're supposed to give them the code for them to know to send it back to this clearinghouse. Now, maybe the TSA person was smart enough because I'm in Florida. They probably just checked something and said, well, this needs to go back to, and it turns out it was my TSA. But they're telling me that doesn't happen unless you give them the code. So you're going to have to create an account anyway, so you'll know if you're in there. And those results are good for 5 years. And then they give you an option to pay, I think it's $45 to keep it for another 5 years, but I think they only allow you once to renew because 10 years you could do a crime somewhere, I guess. So you'll have to, they're not going to let you keep going with the same fingerprints, okay? That's a good question. Oh, yes. Oh, I think her hand was up first. Sorry. Yeah.
It just buzzed.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would be afraid if it buzzed too.
Felt like a cicada. Anyway, don't ask me how I know that. All right, so I'm the program director for the School of MLS here at UF Health, and I have students that are starting in January, and I've not been through this process with the fingerprinting.
Yeah.
And I did see something where there was the 90 days you just mentioned.
Uh-huh.
I had a question. What if my prospective students go and get fingerprinted prior to the 90 days? Is that still going
No,
to be?
they don't, the 90 days only, what I was talking about, 90 days is the time frame for when you can renew your license.
Right,
But you can get your fingerprints done whenever you like.
okay.
It has
Okay.
nothing to do, because
Gotcha.
remember, the fingerprinting applies to every single profession in the state of Florida. Like nursing renews every month. There's a batch of nurses that renew every month. So it's not like lab, we renew all at once. They don't. So it is not dependent on the 90-day. I can't renew ahead of that 90 days, but I can get my screening done way before that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. And the students, we advise to get it done as quick as possible because there has been delays.
Gotcha.
And it's not the state's responsibility to go after those results. We have found that if people are not allowing access to the state to get the results, it's going to show that the results were never done. So it's really important that that little checkbox
Right.
gets done.
And then my other question was, back with, when you were talking about the, it was academic credits
Yeah.
and
Applied.
applied. So if I have an applicant for the program that went through an MLS program, do their MLS college courses, are those considered applied? even
Not the ones that that start with the prefix MLS.
They're not applied, or they are?
Those are applied,
Okay,
so I can't use those.
okay.
But if they start with like, think of those course, like the prerequisites,
Mhm.
like everyone takes them. Those are the academic. And you have to be careful, like micro is one that confuses people, because you could take your micro MLS, right? But if you're taking like a micro for the pre-med people or the bio people, that's the academic one.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Your question?
You probably already answered it because
Oh.
I had a similar one. to
Oh, with
OG, OG. But rather than TSA, I have direct clerk to the FBI.
There has to be in the clearinghouse.
Oh,
Yeah. I mean, good for you. Sounds fancy. You make it, maybe you can ask them to put it in the clearinghouse. Now, remember, they're only good for 5 years. So I don't know when you got it done, but they do allow one renewal. And then after that, they're like, no, because you could have done something in 10 years. By the way, there's nothing that a hospital HR department can do if something comes back negative on your screening background. Because I'm already, my HR department's going to fight that. No. You will not, the system will not allow you to renew. You should get some notification as soon as there's a negative issue or there's a big old flag on your record. You should get some notifications way before, as soon as they discover that. And then the board doesn't know this until the computer system checks and it says, I can't allow you to renew. All right. And there's nothing in statute that will allow a hospital to bypass that. So just keep that in mind because people have already hearing, my HR department's going to fight this. Oh, what type of people do you have working that they already know? Yeah, yeah. Wow. Oh, right. Yes, and I'm joking about it, but yes, and I told our.
We have a question mhm,
God, so techno.
yeah. We have a question from Bren online. Her thing says, for the public health license,
Mhm.
I remember hearing that the BS in biology was very restrictive about the exact nature of the biology courses. So biochemistry, yes, but not environmental science. Will you agree with that assessment for the people who are BS applying for a public health license?
I don't have the statute in front of me, but I think the same applies with the academic versus applied. And it's real, I can't really make that determination based on that question. I would have to look at the transcript of the individual to be able to consult on that.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. My politically correct answer.
Any other questions? Not yet.
Oh, okay.
I won't let you leave without it.
That's excellent. Thank you. Everybody.
All right. A round of applause. Oh. There's another question online. Okay. What?
I mean,
It's red.
that's the only.
Is there a different one? Okay. All right. All right. Thank you, Linda, for a great required presentation. And thank you to everyone for joining us tonight in person and virtually. Once again, thank you, Matt, and Diaswan for your support for the JAM community. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, November 4 at Mayo, and the presentation title is the Applied Research Program at Anastasia Mosquito Control District, St. Johns County, Florida. This will be presented by Dr. Whitney Qualls. And of course, for more information on the rest of the schedule, please look online. Thank you guys so much. See you next month.